Ice in Trackmania is hard to learn. Between random speedups and slowdowns, and how the car slides out sometimes and holds others, it ends up being a very frustrating experience, especially for new players. But what if we had a tool that showed us how much speed we'd get from an ice slide? What if it could warn us if we were about to slide out so we could take corrective action before it was too late? And then, what if it worked not just for ice, but for every surface in the game? Introducing the multi-surface acceleration tool. This graph shows the car's acceleration at an ice slide at different slip angles. The white dot with the trail is the car's actual acceleration. On the left, there's a gear indicator, and on the right, your steering inputs. This curve is determined by the current gear, velocity, and slip angle. Those three factors together determine how much speed you'll get out of an ice slide, or from a speed slide on other surfaces. Holding the ideal angle makes you accelerate quickly, but sliding too little or too much makes the car suddenly grind to a halt. I'll show this off a bit here. In general, the ideal angle is a bit less than 90 degrees, and the faster you go, the smaller the window is where you actually gain speed. Brake tapping to hold the ideal angle is a pretty effective technique to maximize your car's speed, but I won't try to analyze this too much deeper than that. Top ice players already know how to ride these angles, using them to build up crazy amounts of speed. Now, our next worst enemy on ice, gears, also known as sliding out. Let's look at the track of the day from November 9th. It had a few sections where the car tended to slide out, but let's look at the first big downhill. In this example, the tool makes it pretty obvious what happened. The car entered the downhill ice slide in third, then accelerated down the hill past the limit of third gear. Then, the car shifted up to fourth, which caused it to slide out. On a successful run down the same hill, you can see the car enters in fourth gear, and its speed stays within the range for that gear the whole time, so the ice slide holds. After I built this model for ice, I applied it to every other surface in the game, including full-speed tarmac, dirt, grass, plastic, and backwards driving for those surfaces. I have a couple other videos on this channel if you want to see more demos. To use the plugin to watch other players' graphs, start spectating the player's ghost you want to see, open the plugin settings, go to player view and enable self-trail. Then, disable spectate current player and change the player index to grab until you see the trail come out of the player you're watching. Enabling draw all players will make it render graphs and trails for up to 100 ghosts. Nearly everything about the display is customizable, and there's options to enable it, disable it, or lock it to a certain surface on certain maps under the scripts menu. The plugin will be publicly available along with the underlying implementation work. The GitHub links are in the video description. Once the plugin is released, I'll make the repos public. In the next section of this video, I'll be talking through the underlying derivation of the model. After collecting the raw data, I needed to filter it out to just give me the points that represented the ice slides that I was trying to capture. I started by filtering out gear changes, when the wheels weren't fully turned, and when I was braking or accelerating. Then I checked when I was countersteering to the direction of the turn. This gives us a graph that looks like a mess, but importantly, it's a consistent mess. Each color band is a speed bucket, and you can consistently follow these along the X or slip axis. Animating the points to the car's speed makes what we're trying to capture a little bit more clear. The approach I chose to solve this was to cut the graph into sections and to match those sections to curves to capture these shapes as closely as possible. My first approach was to start with hard-coded cutoff values between curves. Initial results with this method were fairly good, but not perfect. This early VHS footage shows what these models look like in practice. The transition points between curve segments are fairly obvious, but it worked as a proof of concept. But something about hard-coding values didn't feel right to me. Early attempts to detect segments failed. There was just too much variation in the data. I needed a method to smooth it out. After breaking up the data by gear and speed, I started averaging groups of points together to make my own synthetic data that I could smoothly fit a curve to. Now, I was finally ready to solve for the algorithm with a fully dynamic method. There's a few approaches I could have taken from here, but I used a greedy algorithm. Start with 3 data points and fit a curve. Using the slip of the next data point, try and extend the curve. Calculate the expected acceleration values that the curve produces and score it against the actual values. If this score is better than a certain threshold, continue. We've extended the curve by 1 point with the same curve, so we know that point follows where the other ones were going. Then we'll resolve for the curve, so it best fits the expanded set of points. Then, if the curve is worse than the threshold, snip it so we just have the good set of points as part of that curve, and save that as a regression point. Then, start with 3 new points and start solving for a new point. And then, that's it. All you have to do is repeat that for every combination of gear and speed. From here, I wrote a function to encode these points into executable AngelScript code, and then wrote the rest of my plugin to read this and turn it into a useful GUI tool. As a demo of what's possible with this approach, before the ice change, certain steering inputs dramatically improved the acceleration your car would get from driving on bobsleigh. I was able to use the same method to solve for and create a live in-game tool that shows the ideal steering angle at a given speed. This regression point method can be applied to any set of input parameters, categorical or interval, for any real function. The final model isn't perfect, but it's generally good enough. To improve it further, I'd honestly just collect more data and retrain the model. The final ice model was trained on around 45 minutes of driving, and the final tarmac model on around 22. Grass, plastic, dirt, and backwards all got less love. There's a lot of development and details that I've skipped over in this video. If there's something you're confused by or want to know more about, leave a comment or reach out on Discord. I think this approach is generally pretty good, and it's necessary for ice, but the fact that it relies on bucketing data to fit curve segments means it's going to be more data hungry than other approaches for shallower use cases. An algorithm that fits a linear piecewise curve to the tarmac data would probably be able to achieve a better fit with less data, but again, it wouldn't be able to also solve ice at the same time. I also like that it's pretty easy to follow along with what this derivation is doing. I generally dislike machine learning applications where the math gets too intense for me to keep up with, and everything is pretty simple and easy to understand here. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. I won't promise any future projects like this, but feel free to reach out if there's something in particular you'd like to see.